Hello, my name is Trisha Young, and I'm an audiovisual journalist at Wisconsin Watch. Today I'm meeting with Hallie Claflin, a reporter with Wisconsin Watch. She recently reported on a phenomenon happening in the state where homeless people are driven to shelters in different cities and counties by police officers and dropped off, often without warning or permission from the shelter. So I get that right, Hallie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
While writing the story, Hallie was able to obtain body cam footage of one of these instances, which she'll be breaking down momentarily. Hallie, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. My name's Hallie Claflin. I am a State House reporter here at Wisconsin Watch, and I've been investigating rural homelessness in Wisconsin for the better part of the last 6 months. Began looking into this drop-offs issue a few months ago when the Eau Claire city attorney came out with a letter that was sent to Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul, asking him to sort of make a decision, a legal decision, and issue an opinion on these drop-offs. So in this particular instance, the Durand Police Department is involved. And so Durand is a very small town in a pretty rural area in western Wisconsin. And what you see in this body cam footage is a Durand police officer. He was responding to a suspicious persons call of a woman who was in a yard. And when he approaches her, he asks her where she came from.
Hi. I'm Officer Tulip. What's going on? Where are you from then originally? Like, where are you trying to get back to tonight?
Well, I'm from Fargo, North Dakota.
You're from Fargo? Okay.
Like,
I don't really know where I'm at. I'm not familiar with the area,
Yep, I understand that. Your ride never showed up?
She said she was from Fargo, North Dakota, but she couldn't really explain how she got to Durand and how she got to Wisconsin. Later in the night, confronts her again when he sees her sitting at a Quick Trip parking lot. He realizes that her ride hasn't come yet.
So, I guess my main concern is I don't want you, it's like kind of cold out tonight, so I was going to offer you, so there is a homeless shelter about 40 minutes north of here in Eau Claire. If you want, I can take you there for the night.
Okay, could you?
Yeah, I can do that. Do you have like a phone or something that you can contact someone to come pick you up from there?
But will they accept me there or no?
They should, yeah. Like, if you don't have anywhere to stay, they should have no problem taking you in. Like, as long as they have room.
He makes a few calls to a number of shelters in the surrounding areas. They're either full, they're either closed for the night with no staff.
The house is not available to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone. Press the pound key to
Bridge to halt.
This is Officer Tulip from the Durand Police.
Hi.
So I was calling you guys to see if you guys had like beds or something like that where I could take her to you guys.
We are actually completely full right now.
Okay. So I just called Hope Gospel. It doesn't look like their offices are open. Like, I called Sojourner's Place, nothing answered, and then I just called up to Bridge to Hope and they said they're full. So.
And he then suggests that she go to Sojourner House, which is a homeless shelter about 40 minutes away in Eau Claire, which is one of the nearest larger cities to Durand. They don't pick up the phone, likely meaning that their staff wasn't present at the late hours of the night. But he decides to take her there anyway.
What I'm probably going to end up doing is just dropping you off at that homeless shelter up there in Eau Claire, okay? It's hard to say. Once I get you up there, they might not even have a bed for you to go, okay? Just once you get up there, ask them for resources.
She agreed to be handcuffed in the backseat of the squad car, and he proceeded to drive 40 minutes to Eau Claire, where he dropped her off. He didn't contact city officials, city police, didn't contact shelter workers before he dropped her off there at Sojourner House, and that's kind of where we're at with this footage.
I mean, there's a couple things to note, essentially, with this footage. I mean, one, it's kind of startling maybe to see an unhoused woman be put into handcuffs in the back of a squad car and then driven to a location she's unfamiliar with. And I think you wrote a bit in your story about this, and police officers kind of saying this is a voluntary act. But I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that kind of gray area of it being voluntary.
So, in the letter that the Eau Claire city attorney sent to Attorney General Josh Kaul, he mentioned that, these folks were being dropped off in Eau Claire, and they hadn't asked to go to Eau Claire. And so when this letter came out to the public, a number of these surrounding police departments outside of Eau Claire, including the Menominee Police Department, the Durand Police Department, they issued statements and released their body cam footage in an effort to combat this assumption that perhaps these people had been taken against their will to Eau Claire. But what we see in the body cam footage is that they're certainly not being taken against their will. But I will say it was suggested to them, and the body cam footage does suggest that this woman didn't quite know where Eau Claire even was. She says multiple times that she doesn't know where she is. The city attorney of Eau Claire would argue that simply by an officer in uniform suggesting that somebody go somewhere, it's enough for them to not want to say no.
So Stephen Nick, as you mentioned, the city attorney for Eau Claire, talked about the outcomes of these drop-offs as well. And you have his quote, which he says,
"None of the individuals we referenced actually received care, and that is the most common outcome from these sort of transports."
The response received from some of these local police departments, like the Durand police chief, they argue that, in small rural places like Durand, there are no resources for these people when they are homeless. Eau Claire is the nearest resource for us. Eau Claire City Attorney Stephen Nick has a different take on this. He's mentioned when these people get to Eau Claire, there's no follow-up to get them back to where they came from or back to where they need to go, essentially leaving them in an unfamiliar city where many of them later had run-ins with law enforcement in Eau Claire, and many of them also had to be taken to the hospital. He often also notes that when these people are dropped off, they often don't actually receive care. The problem here that's really being hidden beneath this clashing of municipalities is the lack of rural resources when it comes to homelessness. When you think about it, in any county, there should be some sort of shelter for someone to go. Even a small rural county where the homeless population might appear to be low. But what we know is that the rural homeless population has been rising in Wisconsin since 2021. And for this woman in particular, in the body cam footage, there are no homeless shelters in Pepin County, where she was, in Durand.
When we're talking about sort of what seems to be, and I think you mentioned in your story, the lack of funding, the lack of resources that are available to rural communities. Where do these investments need to go?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an investment needed in rural areas, whether that be local funding, state funding, even federal funding. It's really interesting to compare what's happening in Wisconsin, what's happening in Eau Claire, to what happened in Santa Cruz. Because what happened in Santa Cruz, when the city banned this practice of dropping off unhoused people, it actually got raised to the state level. So now there's state legislation in California that would ban this practice statewide. The mayor mentioned that it's actually helped to put pressure on some of these surrounding cities to ramp up their own resources and shelters. Santa Cruz notes that it's reduced its street homelessness by nearly 50%. The mayor said that has been because of their investments in things like permanent supportive housing in Santa Cruz. In some of the state's previous state budgets, Democratic Governor Tony Evers, he's proposed a large sum of funding for homelessness and housing assistance, and the Republican-controlled legislature typically scraps the governor's entire budget, but they've cut those proposals by the governor.
We're talking about sort of the statewide policy and the local municipalities in this, but these are people at the end of the day, right? Maybe being taken into unfamiliar locations, that's a safety and health issue for these folks.
Something that I picked up on when I was talking to a number of police chiefs around the state is that there are sort of two different types of drop-offs. There are a drop-off where a law enforcement agency is simply trying to do its best to potentially get this person some care. But I think there's another type of drop-off that's going on here where some municipalities simply want to get rid of these people, and so they're bringing them to the nearest city almost as a way to dump them there and drop them off and sort of get rid of a problem, which is really a serious issue when it comes down to the fact that these are people at the end of the day. And if they're going to be transported somewhere, they need to actually receive resources when they get there. They can't just be dumped and dropped off and left there and with no follow-up to make sure that they're getting resources and care. Even the city attorney in Eau Claire has mentioned that he thinks at the end of the day, most of these law enforcement officers are just trying to do their best to get these people the care that they need. But the message needs to get out that they didn't get that care, that in most cases, they're not getting that care. So how can we fix this drop-offs process, or how can we invest to make sure that these people don't have to be dropped off in the first place?